I like books that are written so well I can pretty much taste, touch, hear, and feel the things that are being described or what's being experienced in the book. And I think most people do. So how do we get our writing to that point? Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. When you write, I'm sure you want to write in a way that allows the reader to easily be immersed in your writing. So when they sit down to read your book, they start reading one sentence, they end up reading 50 pages, and it seems like an hour has gone by in a moment. When we approach describing things in our books, we usually do it geographically or piece by piece. What I'm saying is that when you go about describing things in a book, or when you learn how to describe things in a book from a teacher, the teacher says that you should do it in some logical form. You combine like things. You do something from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top. You start at one end until you go to the other. You point out specific things in the room that are important. And like I said before, all these different ways we do this makes logical sense, and that's why we do it this way. Or if you happen to be a third grader, your teacher is telling you to do it this way. Now, logic is something I talk about a lot when writing. I think there is a logical core at the center of our thinking. I don't know if that is the only thing at the center of our thinking, and I don't think that logical core is perfect logic, but there is a part of us that wants to make sense out of the world, whether that's through perfect logic or not. And when we try to figure out how to look at the world and abstract that world in our writing, we are going back to that logical core. That's what the teachers are going back to when they tell you to start at one place in the room and make your way around the room. That's what writing coaches also might be telling you when they say start at the bottom of a character when you're describing them and move from the feet all the way up to the top. And I can't say that I haven't done this before. I've taken on that type of idea. I've approached writing in that way. But I think that we should change our perspective, and it's not because we're moving away from logic. I think that by changing our perspective on how we should write specific details in our books, we are actually getting closer to logic. I think by changing our perspective to this new one, we are actually tapping into the logic of how we actually work within the world. We're getting closer to the center of how we actually work in the world as logical beings, or maybe we would say it as flawed logical beings. This different perspective on writing details in your story that you can taste, that you can touch, that you can hear just around the corner, that you can almost see, is summed up in one question. How do I experience something? Maybe I should make that question more specific. How do I actually experience something in the world? So think about it this way. If you go swimming, and if you jump into the water, and you become submersed by the water, where is your attention focused when you are submersed? You can't focus on every single aspect of your body. It might seem odd because we have sensory receptors all over our body, but we don't actually focus on every single part of our body at once. What I've found to be the case is that my attention narrows to something about the size of a basketball or even something smaller. And my attention doesn't necessarily narrow in terms of what I see, because if I'm going underwater and I'm closing my eyes, I'm experiencing something different than sight at the time. I'm actually experiencing darkness. And when I experience darkness, then other senses take over, and I have to rely on those senses to figure out what's happening. So if you are trying to write someone jumping into water, you need to go into water, or at least have a very good imagination about going into water, and pay attention to what you're actually experiencing. Pay attention to those salient features, the features that stick out. And by paying attention to those salient features and seeing where your mind goes and where it walks as you're in that experience, then you can better take that experience and abstract it into writing. Again, this goes back to that question. How do you experience things? How do you actually experience things? And you can use this concept, you can use this paradigm shift with other aspects of reality as well. How do you actually experience those things? When I walk into a room, I don't see every part of the room. I probably see 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 different aspects of that room. And though I do see more of that room when I walk in, the rest is fuzzy in my experience. I'm not taking in the room in every little tiny detail and how every little tiny detail looks. I'm taking in the room as a whole, and then as I said before, there's specific details that stick out. If you change your thinking about how you're describing things in your writing, you can apply this to any situation you're in. And then, if you can accurately assess how you actually experience things, you're going to get a unique way to write those different aspects. In some cases, you are going to run into situations that go beyond the scope of your ability to write what is happening. If you are trying to write about great loss, you might find yourself at a loss for words, or if you're trying to write about great happiness, you might find that you just can't reach to the same heights of ecstasy that you were able to reach when you experienced that thing. What I recommend in these situations is that you look at your bodily reactions to what's going on. There are certain things that happen to a person when they are extremely depressed. There are certain things that happen to a person when they are extremely happy. And in some cases, you can just write about those emotions and try to express them the best you're able to, but you can also do something else. Instead of trying to write about the emotions, you can actually connect to the emotions by writing about the things that make those emotions happen. This is a really tricky thing to do, in my opinion, because what you need to do is you actually need to immerse yourself in the experience you're trying to write about. And you need to try to explain that experience in your writing as closely as you're able to, or in a way that can be understood by the audience. And you need to make sure that writing actually brings out the correct emotion. So it's a bit more complex than just describing exactly how you experience things. But I still think it is the same process. But instead of just thinking back to a specific experience you had, you're trying to create a new experience in your mind. I've already talked about this idea that writing is similar to acting, where you put on a mask in many cases and you're trying to write from that character's perspective. And I've talked about this idea that this is especially the case when you're writing in first person, and this is the same process. This is the same idea. You aren't necessarily trying to put on the mask of another character right now, but you are trying to immerse yourself in an experience to see if that experience actually elicits an emotion. And if you can walk yourself through that process, walk yourself through that experience, and you can get to a point that you actually have an emotional reaction, you can take that experience, you can see how you interacted with that experience, and you can write that experience into your story. It's of course not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than nothing. In general, I would give you the advice to try to actually have the experiences you're writing about, but it isn't always the case that we can do this. So this is another way we can get closer to that actual reality. Now, if you've noticed something, I don't give a step-by-step guide in how to do this. What I was talking about before with trying to walk yourself through an experience you haven't been in isn't necessarily a step-by-step guide. You've got to figure out how to do that yourself. And similarly, I'm not trying to give you a step-by-step guide on how to experience reality. And I'm not giving you a step-by-step guide on how to write that reality down. And there is a very specific reason for this. We have 5 different senses. Some people think we have 6, but we definitely have 5 different senses, and all those different senses can be experienced in a lot of different ways. And we all write things, or we all experience things in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. If I understand car mechanics, if I understand how a car is put together, I'm going to be talking about that car in a different way and experiencing it in a different way than you are. If I'm a bird watcher, which I'm not, if I'm a bird watcher, I'm going to take into account the birds around me in a different way than you do. Now, you're not going to be putting every little aspect of the world into your writing. You're not going to try to say, hey, I understand this specific thing, therefore it should go into my writing. But what I'm saying is different people have different experiences. Different people have different preconceived notions. We all come from different areas. And if you decide to write exactly like me just because you think my writing's good, you might be missing out on your writing. You might be missing out on the writing that makes you very unique, that makes you stand out, that makes you write something that is phenomenal, something that is mind-blowing, something that really affects people in a way that I can't. So by not writing in that way, by not actually taking into account how you experience things, you may be missing out on what makes you a great writer. And that would be a tragedy. I honestly think so. It'd be a complete tragedy. If you enjoyed this, you're probably wondering how you can support me. Well, you can actually do two simple things. Follow the first link below to grab a copy of my book, and then follow the second link and sign up for my newsletter. It's that simple. Those two things will mean the world to me and give me more time to write books and create content for you. As always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.